Introduction, and I want to thank Alan Bruce very much for that introduction and in welcoming myself and my colleague Dr. Wafa Ashour. And we are pleased to be presenting this research which we have conducted over the past couple of years, and we have looked at the parents and now we have looked at the children's issues. And Dr. Wafa and I are sharing the slides, so we will take turns. And this is the Palestinian context. The research shows that usually children's voices are not heard directly and very much rely on adults to mediate and to intervene with the
Dr.
experience.
Imelda, Doctor,
Yes.
if you could please, I can start this slide.
Yes, you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to with you today, and good morning from Palestine. My name is Wafa.a. Ashour. I am from Ministry of Education and Higher Education from Palestine. Palestine context, previous research lacks the children's voices. Research shows that war studies usually marginalize children's direct voices and rely on adults to interpret their experience. Here we have a context of the current study, work methodology, interviews, and comprehensive recommendations. First, this study is the second part of previous study that revealed that 87% of Gaza's children had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Second, 24 children were interviewed directly in October 2024 as the war continued using the Landy model ethically. Third, the interviews with the child focused on three axes: the psychological and physical impact, their coping mechanism, and support needs. The last point, covering as aspects of the children's lives. So, also the participating children did not have ambition. The recommendations included supporting injured children due to the high rates of ambition in Gaza. Study methodology, listening to children's voices, children's rise to the participate, involving children in research and decisions that affect their lives is an inherent right of them. Landy module. This module is derived from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child as a practical framework for gathering children voice in an genuine and reliable way. The four elements of the module, it consists of four equally important elements: space, voice, audience, and influence. Importance of impact, the paragraph emphasizes that the element of influence is essential. Without it, the process becomes merely a formal or tokenistic participation with no real value. Doctor?
Thank you. So just to expand on the Lundy model, and our co-moderator, Joanne, is probably very familiar with this, as she comes from the university where Dr. Lundy did this research. The importance of this model is elaborated here in showing that the children are given a space, which is a really important, safe and inclusive opportunity to form an expressive view. And it can be seen that children, if they're not in a safe environment, for example, if it's a case of abuse and they have abusers in the space, they won't be able to speak freely. So the children really need to trust the space first and foremost. After that, then they can be facilitated to express their views freely in whatever way they choose. And we have children who are experiencing trauma who are frozen and who have lost, don't speak. And they can draw and they can use other methodologies and play. So these elements have to include not just our physical voices, but also all types of freedom of expression for the children. Then it comes to the adults and the audience, and the view must be listened to. And this is really important to hear what the children have expressed and to understand the meaning behind their expression. This expression has not been mediated by an adult, it is direct from the child to the appropriate audience for this model. And then after that, it is our responsibility to take that influence and use it and act upon it. So we have hopefully listened to the children with their issues and brought it into the recommendations that we have. Doctor?
Thank you. Children in war and natural disasters. Psychological impact. Wars cause children psychological trauma, depression, and deep anxiety. War vs disaster. Children of natural disaster recover with support after a crisis. While children of ongoing wars are bereft of stability and period of recovery. The specificity of Gaza children face endless and continuous trauma, which increases their risk of chronic mental disorders and intergenerational trauma. Recovery and protective factor. Key factor for trauma recovery, secure parental attachment, the emotional capacity of educators to self-control, social support, and structured therapeutic and psychological intervention. The importance of relational health, strong attachment in the early years enhances children's ability to recover for adversity. The four pillars of the HOPE module for shock mitigation: relationships, safe and supportive, environment, stable, participation, social and civic, growth, emotional. Finally, base of recommendations integrate the pillars of the HOPE module with evidence-based interventions. Doctor,
Yep.
continue, please.
Oh, I think, yeah, sorry, I thought you were doing this one. So trauma is definitely linked to the reality of life. As Dr. Wafa has just said, the environment needs to be stable, for example. And in this case, it is not. And we have to look at the structural conditions around the children that they're experiencing. So the consequences of this instability means continued displacement, severe shortages of food, water, and shelter, and these compound their emotional suffering and they fail the fragile attempts to cope. So if you link it to a model like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see the very basic needs are just being totally ignored and not being met. If there are no interventions, there are long-term risks, a huge number, we just list a few here. The child will have poor executive function, poor organisation, and poor emotional discipline. They may experience disintegration and disruption of family bonds and attachment. There is a decline in achievement of educational and education outcomes, and we do refer to this later. It's a very important aspect. And there is a significant risk of epigenetic trauma, and that is of inheriting trauma across generations. So the parents, the grandparents have all experienced similar trauma, and then this is coming on down physically through their genetics. So the scale of the trauma from the first study, the research question sought to establish in the first study the reality of the psychological trauma among the children. And as Dr. Wafa has said, it amounted to 87%. It was a very high percentage. We interviewed and dealt with 387 parents. So we had a very good statistical number to establish this. And the highest degree, they had a number of statements which states that the cause of the child's trauma was exposure to direct or indirect shooting. And this came up very highly in all the responses. And you can still see it in the children's responses in this study. And the child has difficulty sleeping, and that ranks second. Terrible nightmares, awful, catastrophic nightmares for the children. And the child's fears of the dark, that came in very high as well. And that's linked into all those other fears where they're not in control of the situation. In the penultimate place, the statement the child feels upset and has tantrums, and that was very highly rated as well. And also, as I said earlier, the child's inability to express emotions, perhaps being frozen, had an approval rate. So the impact of this trauma on these children is ongoing, it's long term, and it's severely damaging, and it's backed up by this study on the children's responses. So our recommendations and our recovery features I'll deal with next. And in terms of child protection, it's one of the most crucial areas for dealing with the children. We need to create child-friendly spaces that provide safety and daily routines. The children are at immense risk for things like child abuse, trafficking, all of the other features, if they are not, a lot of them are not accompanied, or they are in indirect contact with parents and carers. So it's not a child-friendly space at the moment at all. So we need to strengthen family unity, and we need to support unaccompanied minors. We need to then train the community and teachers to monitor the risks that the children might be experiencing of abuse and neglect as distinct from the trauma, because they could be experiencing both in parallel. We need to activate secure reporting and monitoring mechanisms. The next key aspect of the children, providing support to the children, is to provide mental health and psychosocial support. And they need to really expand child-focused psychological services. And these would be perhaps encouraged through outside funding, and perhaps there are already some charities doing this and some organisations doing this. This needs to be expanded rapidly. Psychological first aid through things like play, music, art, storytelling. As I said already, they're a key element in helping children to express themselves. And we have the lovely examples, some of you may have seen the videos of the Sunbirds in Gaza, where they are having music groups on the beach, and they have terrific outcomes from that. And then create clear diversion pathways for children in need of specialist care. Not all children will have long-lasting trauma. Some of them will have the resilience factors built in from what Dr. Wafa referred to in the relational aspects, as Dr. Bruce Perry from the ULS has highlighted with his work, that the stronger the bonds in the early years, in very early years with the family, the more resilient the children can be, the better the attachment is really important. We need to integrate programs to deal with grief and loss. I'd say practically every child has experienced loss and is going through grief. And we need to relieve sleep disorders and nightmares. So in terms of recovery, the educational aspects were the original starting points for some of this work. And we need to restore the routine of education, either formal or non-formal, as soon as possible. And as I gave the example already, the music classes on the beach are another ideal informal way to do this. We need to integrate social emotional learning and psychoactive activities within education. Our educators are doing courses and CPD courses that Dr. Wafa has been working with, and they are looking at aspects of mental health and ideas like this. We need to adopt flexible teaching methods that take into account poor concentration and memory problems caused by trauma. The flexible teaching methods, they need to be aware of trauma to the point that they know that children may absolutely forget what they're doing. We have this example here. A lot of children, some children mentioned in our study that they had forgotten the Quran. They had been learning it and they had forgotten it and finding it very difficult to relearn. So these things they are unlearning or forgetting what they've learned. And the teachers need to be aware of this and need to make allowances. And we need to do this in a flexible, stress-free way so the children keep building minor sense of accomplishment, building minor steps and minor achievements, which is very useful. Family support is the second aspect of recovery. And this, as I said, with the relational issue is very important. And programs to support parents and provide them with trauma management skills at a basic level and positive communication. Encourage joint family coping mechanisms such as play and daily routines. And help parents learn how much of a contribution that they can make to the children's recovery and to their own as well. Involving parents in psychological support programs to relieve their stress, activating community activities to promote collective adaptation and mutual assistance. And then basic needs. These are so basic. I saw the basic services have been cut off again this week by the occupying forces, which is most unfortunate. So providing food, water and shelter, and they're directly related to psychological well-being. Improve aid distribution to reduce long, humiliating queues. Many of the children spoke of having to stand in these queues. Reduce frequent displacement and communicate with family to alleviate anxiety. The frequent displacement came up regularly. The children learned not to trust that they were told they'd be going to this tent for the next forever, and then they'd be moved on a week later. So the displacement has been a very disruptive factor in their trauma. Integrating psychosocial support and child protection as a pillar of humanitarian planning with long-term sustained funding. And in conclusion, beyond traditional narratives, the study proved that the child's first-hand experiences are much deeper than what traditional adults' assessments or reports convey. Hearing first-hand from the children what the nightmares were, rather than hearing from the parents who were seeing the effects of the nightmares, was much more valuable. The depth of disruption. The war has produced deep traumas and disruptions in children's psychological, social, and cognitive well-being. They are structurally linked to harsh living conditions and ongoing displacement. The success of the Lundy model, it provided a systematic framework that allowed children to safely express their opinions to people who would listen, and for the gap of their lack of direct voices to alleviate the gap of their lack of direct voices in the literature of war. So then the need for multi-level interventions.
Excuse me,
Short-term.
Doctor, I can continue?
Yes, you can continue. That's grand.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Conclusion, the need of multi-level intervention. The study recommends psychological support programs that address immediate needs and build for long-term recovery, while strengthening of the role of family, school, and community. Policy making and the future, the finding underscore the urgent need for policy that protect children and reduce the transmission of trauma across generations with the design of programs centered around the child's vision. Thank you very much, and we wait finally your question, please.
Thank you very much for that presentation, both Wafa and Imelda. Absolutely fascinating and in many ways